Hi, welcome to Writing Notes. This is a program intended to help you navigate your way through introductory composition courses. A lot of this is going to be geared toward English 102 here at my own university, West Virginia University, but a lot of the stuff that I'm going to talk about will apply across the board. Today what I want to do in this first video is to start giving you guys a couple of big tips about how to get the most out of your university education. Now, chances are you're paying a ton of money to come to a university. You want the best product for your money, right? Yeah. So how do you get that? Part of the way that Americans tend to be trained to think about university is you come and you sit and the teacher tells you things and then you know them and then you've got your money's worth. Totally wrong. What you pay for at university is the opportunity to apply yourself to the study of whatever it is that you're majoring in. So for me, I was an English major. What I paid the now 3 universities I've been to do was to give me the resources, give me access, give me experts who would help me pursue knowledge on my own. How do you do this? This is a big question. And your best friend at university is going to be this guy right here. Questions. The thing that you need to do to be a successful student is to always, always, always be asking questions. It's only by asking questions and by pursuing the answers to those questions that you can build knowledge yourself. Because again, you shouldn't be a passive sort of receptacle. And this is actually a huge problem with lecture classes, is that lecture classes urge you to sit quietly, urge you to just listen, urge you to take multiple choice exams. They don't urge you to really learn. And this is kind of a secret of academics. We all know that that's a terrible way to educate students. But what you guys can do, what you as students can do, is overcome that by asking questions. Why? How do we know this? Why do we believe this? What evidence is there for this? Are there different ways of looking at this? Are our assumptions good? Can we think about this differently? What happens if we approach it from a different angle? These are the kinds of things that you guys should, can, and ideally are doing. Now, how do you set yourself up for this? Because this is actually what we call critical thinking. This is a term I'm sure that you've all heard before, since pretty much every university curriculum now says critical thinking is a skill that we want our students to develop. That's actually basically what critical thinking means, is the ability to figure out what the right kinds of questions to ask are. So again, for me, I was an English major, so I've spent the better part of the past 7 years or so figuring out what kinds of questions I should be asking as an English major. So figuring out how to interrogate literature, figuring out how to apply critical theory to literature, figuring out how to think more broadly about what we consider literature, things like this. I was also a history minor, and so a large portion of that was spent figuring out what kinds of things history majors should be asking. Things about movements of history, things about interconnections between politics, economics, the social, the aesthetic, thinking about the ways in which we see different connections between these sort of seemingly disparate things, stuff like this. And the same goes for chemistry, the same goes for biology, the same goes for math, art, political science, psychology, nursing. Any discipline in the academy has its own sets of questions that it asks. How do you figure out what kinds of questions your discipline asks? This is a really challenging thing, and this is part of the reason that you spend at least 4 years in college, in most cases, is because it takes a long time to figure out what kinds of knowledge you should pursue and how you should pursue it for your discipline. And actually, one of the benefits of a liberal arts education or a GEC curriculum, general education curriculum, is that it forces you to try and pursue knowledge in a variety of different ways. But in terms of how you figure out what kinds of questions to ask for your discipline, the best way is to read. The second best way is to ask your instructors. Talk to your instructors individually, ask them questions in class, say, how do we know these kinds of things? What kinds of questions did the researchers ask who got to this point? And so on and so on. But the best way to do this is to read. Read studies that are being published in your discipline, read books about your discipline, read articles, read your textbooks, and read actively. And this is really, really, really crucial. So a lot of times we have this sort of notion that reading is just, I've scanned the words on the page. So you take, let's say, reading, love is like a red, red rose, it's newly sprung in June. That's not really reading. I mean, it's reading in the most basic and fundamental sense of it. It's not the kind of reading that you should be doing in university. What you should be doing in university is what's called active reading. So this is where you take notes, this is where you highlight things that you notice, where you write responses to things, where you write questions about things. And I'll show you a bit of this. So last semester I taught a course on poetry and drama, and we read My Heart's in the Highlands by Robert Burns. I took notes on this. These were the notes that I took in preparation for a discussion of this poem. So you can see here I've got things like the repetition. Like I marked this repetition. And then the question becomes, why do we have this repetition? You see, I noticed landscape and nature imagery. This is crucial to the poem. What is Burns saying with that? I've actually posed a question here directly to the text. This is a speaker who clearly loves Scotland, so I want to know why it is that he's leaving the Highlands. These are the kinds of things you do with active reading. And then what you should be doing is taking all of your books to class on any given day. And you take your active reading notes, you take your questions you've posed, take your things that you've noticed, take your things that you say, I feel like this is important, but I don't know why yet. And you say, all right, now I've got an instructor here. This is an instructor who presumably has some degree of expertise about this subject. Now I'm going to ask for this person's opinion. Professor, instructor, doctor, whatever it is, what does this thing mean? I noticed this thing and I don't understand it. I have this question. And again, you can do this even with textbooks. So the textbook for my composition course is Joining Academic Conversations. So for instance, we have a page on developing a strong thesis statement. What you can do as an active reader is annotate that page. Say, here's a sentence. I'm not sure I agree with this. I don't really know why. Can you talk through this? Can you explain this to me? We've got these 6 criteria. I'm not sure how they all work. Can you give us an example of a thesis statement that's, say, particularly elegant, or that's particularly debatable? How do we know if we've gotten to this point? These are the kinds of questions that you as a student should be asking, because ultimately you're paying for this education. You need to be responsible for making sure that you get the most out of it. You need to be working harder than your instructors. Thanks.